for our mental health today, let's talk about know your self-worth.
Any segue is good, man, for mental
So
health.
we got last week we got something from the audience. This week we got something from the audience. This came from Matt on Twitter. He sent this to me. He said, I have a mental health minute topic for the show, and I think you will agree. Know your self-worth. I've struggled with it over the last year and a half, but I'm finally finding it again. We were always quick to find excuses as to why we were not happy with ourselves, but lately I found it again. A few nice comments here and there go a long way. Point being, nobody knows what others are going through, and a kind word or gesture can go a long way. Speaking of experience, I think this is a good lesson for everybody. Things aren't always the best, but night is always darkest before the dawn. There's always tomorrow. And then thanks for every week. So Gonky, we've kind of talked about this a little bit. Imposter syndrome. I think that's probably one of the places you see it a little bit more, where you really don't feel like you're worthy. You don't feel like you're good enough. I mean, and we're sitting here going, I can't believe people watch this show. So, we sometimes, just as humans, there's this balance between being humble and being like, just outright down on yourself. Knowing your self-worth is important, because if you don't, then you'll go along with things that might not be good for you. And I think part of the recruitment and retention problem is that people now more than ever are starting to realize their self-worth and realizing that they don't necessarily need what others have to offer. And you see that with airlines, where, contracts come out and they said, no, we're worth this. And people leave the military because they're like, look, dude, I'm worth this amount of money or this amount of quality of life, and you're not providing that for me. My family's more important. I'm going to go that way. And that by itself is mental health, because when you maintain a bad situation just for the sake of it and don't evaluate what you are worth, whether it's financially or just being appreciated, it's time to go find something else, because there's nothing worse than maintaining a toxic environment that is a detriment to your own mental health, because you just don't realize what you're worth. The other piece to this too is, when you are evaluating yourself, knowing that you are a good person and knowing that you are better than what your critics are. Because sometimes we're our worst critic, but sometimes we also listen to critics that don't have a vested interest in our well-being. And we take that on board and believe them and start believing in the negativity, when the reality is we are worth so much more. And we stay in that situation when really we should get out and go, okay, that's not for us. So part of fixing that is having a strong group of friends and strong support network that can help you evaluate your self-worth. And when you start saying, hey, I'm not worthy, you go, yeah, you are. You actually are a good person. You've done good things. And somebody that kind of keeps you within the lines that, you keep bouncing off of, to remind you that, hey, you do have a high self-worth. I will always talk about, 988. If you need help, you feel like you want to take a permanent solution to a temporary problem, counseling, military one source, even 911, if you feel like, you're about to hurt yourself, because you are worth continuing and you are worth moving on. But Gonky, what do you think is, knowing your self-worth and how to make yourself feel worthy? I mean, continue to feel worthy.
Yeah, I mean, that can mean, self-worth can mean a lot of different things to different people. I mean, you covered it quite well, as usual. What I will add is, I believe we were, created in the image of God, and we're all flawed. And, I can tell you as a dad, I've recently realized that, I think as human beings, we're not born with a humble heart. My kid, like, if I tell him, hey, gee, you went through that corner, really fast, he'll say, I know. And then my next one was like, dude, have some humble pie. I'm like, I was complimenting you. I know is not really the reaction you would expect out of anybody but a kid, right? So I think as we grow older, the world kind of beats us up a little bit, which you kind of alluded to. And if you don't I mean, if you let it, like Rocky says, right? If you let it, it'll beat you down, right? I mean, and knowing your self-worth can take a little bit of time, like when I first became a fighter pilot, I didn't really know where I stood, among my peers, right? So that can be kind of a weird time, but I mean, it doesn't take long. And, at the end of the day, you, uh, you're a human being that is worth a lot to your friends and family around you. I mean, how many times have you seen somebody unfortunately take their own life, and like, there's just hundreds and hundreds, an outpouring of like of people who care, right? So um I would say it's uh you have to have a little bit of confidence, and I don't, I'm not beating the Bible thing, but I think that if you're grounded spiritually, I would say that goes a long way to knowing your self-worth. For example, I can only speak for myself, and my wife will, she would tell you this too. I don't really care what other people think. Like, I know where I stand with, me and God, and as long as I am in my own mind on the path that he has for me, and I'm striving for that and working towards that. So I guess if you're always working towards a goal, that helps you with knowing where you're standing, what your self-worth is. You it's not as much of an issue. I'm not saying it's not, but that's probably what I would add, man, is if you're spiritually grounded, whatever that means, I think that can go a long way. Doug?
This is a good one. I want to pick up on something Mover said, although it's kind of a different angle, that if you have low self-worth, you can be exploited, but there are also people who will challenge your self-worth in order to exploit you. And having a very solid idea of where you're at and where you're coming from can be a good way to combat that. I'm in the business of being an expert on certain things. I mean, I literally get paid to do that every day. And sometimes I'm going to take a different tack on what you said too, Gonki. Sometimes for me, it's an objective reality. I mean, I know how I got here. I know things that other people don't know because that's my job. And it's also at the same time, though, it's very domain specific. Like I'm a race driving instructor because I've done it a lot, not because I have God-given talent. So, looking at certain domains and saying, hey, I really know this stuff can be a good anchor point for me, at least, to kind of get back on track with self-worth sometimes.
It's the old, you ever watch Parks and Rec, and Ron Swanson's going through the hardware store and he's like, hey, can I help you? He's like, I know more than you. And he just keeps walking by him.
Funny you should mention that. My wife and I were having a conversation along those lines earlier tonight.
Perfect.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite clips. I use that every now and then, I know more than you. Because I think about it every time somebody starts arguing with me in the YouTube comment section. It's like, I know more than you. Post your credentials or shut up. That's it. It's not a conversation. Yeah. But sometimes it is. Sometimes it is a dialogue, I think. But to the mental health side of things, you just have to know your boundaries and know that, you can have that dialogue with somebody. But at the end of the day, like Doug said, one person is an expert and one person isn't. So, and like you said, Gonki, you got to take that golden retriever energy and not care what anybody thinks about you. Just keep wagging your tail. It's all going to be fine.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you joke about that, right? But it is effective. It works. I mean, it works for me. That's just how I live, man.
I'm jealous. I wish I too could be a golden retriever.
We all can't have long blonde hair, man, or golden hair. Sorry.
I guess you'd be more like a black lab.
Yeah, dude.
Certainly the same neighborhood.
You're a designer dog, Gonki. You're definitely a designer dog.
I'm a purse dog.